Before we get started with today's video, we'd just like to offer you a free online evaluation of your property. If you're interested in knowing the value of your home, just go to vancouverhousevalues.net, fill out the form, and we will instantly email you out the value of your home. I'm Jamie Hooper with Remax Crest and jamiehooper.com, and today we're going to talk about the 40-year history of Greater Vancouver real estate. We're going to go all the way back to January of 1981. But before we do that, I'd just like to remind you that if you get any value out of these videos, you enjoy them, please either make a comment if you're on our YouTube channel or Facebook page, and like or even subscribe to either of those pages. So let's go back to January of 1981, which, not coincidentally, we're starting at because it's the 40th anniversary, because it's also when the Greater Vancouver real estate market crashed. This came right after 2 years of where the market pretty much doubled over a 2-year period in 1979 and 1980. And if you'd paid in 1980 $150,000 for your house at the peak, well, by the end of 1981, a year later, you were down about 33% and your house was worth $100,000. So why did this happen? What caused the markets to crash? Well, interest rates in 1978 for a mortgage were around 9.5%. What was happening at the same time was rapid inflation. It was out of control inflation. So what the way the governments combat that, or the banks combat that, is they raise interest rates. Well, 3 years later, that same mortgage rate that you could have gotten for 9.5% was now 18.5%, and it did even go higher, up to 21%. So what happened was the cost of borrowing money more than doubled. And when that happens, something has to give to make it affordable. So what you saw were builders going broke, doing every kind of deal they could to get into their houses. Bankruptcies were at all-time highs, and it set the market into a tailspin for the next 2 to 3 years. After that came the period between 1983 and 1985, where the market stabilized and started to flatten out. There was a lot of pre-Expo 86 construction and hype going on in Vancouver, and interest rates also started to relax at that time. In 1986, the World's Fair happened in Vancouver, and this was the thing that began to change Vancouver real estate forever and the city itself. So in 1986, let's go back to 1945, right after World War II. The population of Greater Vancouver was around 400,000 people. By 1986, it was 1.4 million. By the year 2000, it was 2 million. Today it's 2.8 million, and they're saying there's going to be 4 million people here by 2040. So, like it or not, the city has changed forever because of this. The World's Fair, again, did a lot to change that. They had projected 12 million people to come and visit the city that summer. Well, they got almost 22 million, I believe the figure was. So what this did was it exposed the city to the world, where people that had never been here before. Add to that, we had IndyCar races, golf tournaments, NBA basketball, and the post-Expo period was a real boom time for people that had never been here before. Between 1987 and 1993, the post-Expo boom, the cost of a detached house doubled from about $185,000 in 1987 to around $385,000 in 1993. The economy was on fire, and things were very good in the province during that period of the time, and the market continued its upward trend. And then came the 1990s. From 1993 to 2001, the markets in Greater Vancouver were not very good. The economy, and nor was the economy. The economies in the rest of North America and the real estate markets were doing very well. We had problems in our province. The market didn't really tank during that period of time. If you had purchased your home in 1993 at the peak for $400,000, by 2000, it was probably down 15 to 20%, and it would have been worth in the 330-ish range by that point. Interest rates were typically between 5.5% at a low, and the highest they got to during that period of time was around 8% for a period in 1994 and 1995. So again, what we see today with multiple offers all over the place, realtors have become so jaded by it, and maybe jaded's a bad word. Realtors have become so used to the fact that you get multiple offers on every property that you list at the proper price. That just never occurred in the 90s. You seldom, if ever. I'll bet you during the entire decade, I saw multiple offers maybe 5 or 10 times. What contributed to this, in my mind, we had 3 scandal-filled provincial governments in a row. We had Bill Vander Zalm, we had Mike Harcourt, and we had Glenn Clark. And all you ever read about in the paper was these guys, one thing after another, either themselves or their cabinet ministers always getting caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Probably didn't leave a lot of time to govern the business of the province as they were trying to clean up one political mess after another. So that was the mood of things around here. This is around the period of time I started. I became a realtor in 1993, right when this period began. And I remember that I always had 20 or 25 listings at one time then, because a house took 6 to 9 months to sell. Not like today where you could sell it in 6 to 9 hours if you wanted to sell a house today. So your listings accumulated. I always get a kick out of it today when I'm interviewing with a seller to sell their home, when they say to me, well, how many listings do you have right now? Thinking that makes me more qualified to do the job. If I see a guy now with 20 listings, or a realtor, I shouldn't say guy, any realtor with 20 listings, I'll show you someone who's got 20 overpriced listings that aren't selling. Anyway, so that was the story of the 1990s, and it went on like that until 2001. In 2001, 2 things happened to turn the market around. The first thing was there was a change in provincial government in May of 2001. And I had been a realtor for 8 years at this point, and literally the days following the provincial election, the phones started to ring like I had never seen them ring before. And that continued all through the summer of 2001. Typically, summer's a little slower in our area because it rains here so much. People, typically take the summer away and shop for their homes in the spring and in the fall. So that was the first thing that kick-started the market. The second thing, believe it or not, was September 11th. September 11th helped make the market take off around here. Now, that's a good example of how something that happens, a disaster that happens in the other side of the world, can affect our market. How did September 11th affect our market here? Well, the Americans closed down the New York Stock Exchange, the Dow Jones, for the remainder of that week. And during that week, they dropped the interest rates, I believe, 1% because they were concerned that the markets were going to crash when they reopened them, but they didn't. But they did continue to drop those rates another point to 1.5 over the next month or two. And all of a sudden, we had 3.5% interest rates in Vancouver. Well, to give you an example, you could buy a house on the west side still for $400,000 in 2001. You could buy a house on the east side for $280,000. You could get a house in Richmond for $350,000. You could get a nice house in Ladner for $300,000. And at 3.5% interest rates, it was literally cheaper to own than it was to pay your rent. So the market took off and continued to take off right up until 2008. In 2000, at that point, what happened was the banking crisis in the United States. So in 2008, the beginning of it, the banking crisis was taking hold in the US, and it started to affect our markets, and things gradually slowed down until by summertime it was pretty darn quiet around here as well. People didn't know what was going to happen, if this was going to have a ripple effect around the world. It certainly did have a ripple effect on our market for about a 12-month period from the last half of 2008 until 2009. But then the market did start to recover, and by the end of the year in 2009, our prices were higher than they were in 2008. 2010 was the post-Olympic boom in prices. Prices pretty much went straight up from right after the comeback from the U.S. banking crisis to all the way through to the summer of 2016. What happened in 2015 and 2016, there was a lot of talk about the provincial government needing to step in and do something to cool the markets off. Now, that's a whole other story to talk about whether government should intervene in free markets or not. I'm sure we all have our own opinions on that. But nonetheless, they did, and they introduced the foreign buyers tax in August of 2016. And what this did at this point is it pretty much brought the detached housing market to a grinding halt. In 2010, if you had purchased your home for approximately, if you paid $1 million for your home somewhere in the greater Vancouver area, by 2016, that house was worth $1.8 million. From 2016 till 2020, we had two different types of markets. If we go from 2016 to 2018, the detached housing market was in quite a slump that continued through till the beginning of this year, or I should say the middle of last year, 2020. The condo market took off into the fall of 2015 and stayed hot for the next 2.5 years till about 2018, and has been kind of lethargic ever since then. So that brings us to today. So where we're at today is we have markets that are absolutely on fire. If you price your home properly, it should sell with multiple offers as soon as you set it up and talk to your realtor. And what I mean by that is a lot of people will hold off after they list their home for 7 days now before they look at offers, just so they make sure that they put themselves in a position where they can get that, and then hopefully drive the price up that they get on the sale of their home. So now people always ask me where they think this market's headed and where we're going to go. Well, long term, I always think that Vancouver is going to be a fabulous investment. It's the best city in the best country in the world. When the weather's nice here, there is no place nicer to be, and that's not a secret anymore. It's also landlocked. You can't go north, south, west. You used to be able to go east and get land. There's a little bit left, but not very much. And that's why you see the explosion all up in the air. Long term, this place is the place you want to be. The only thing, and I don't say this tongue in cheek, I really mean it, a natural disaster could be the only thing that would really affect this market in a huge way long term if something like that ever happened. We saw in 2011 the tsunami in Japan affected our market over here and caused us to take a 6 to 12 month dip. And when I gave the example earlier about 2011 and the September 11th, the crisis on the other side of the world and the disaster affecting our markets here. So these things can happen. Will it go up forever? No markets do. And this market's not going to continue going up forever. But it will have peaks and valleys, and over the long term, you will always make money. If you had bought your house in 1996 on the west side of Vancouver for $300,000, it would probably be worth $2.2 million today. At the peak, it would have been higher in 2016. So my point, but there were a bunch of roadblock ups and downs during that way. But when you came out the end, you had a huge tax-free earning on your principal residence. So short term, there could be some issues. We're going to see interest rates rise over the next year, and the question is how much, and how much of an impact is that going going to have on the market. It could, depending on how much they go up, it could have some short-term implications to the greater Vancouver market again. So thanks for taking the time to listen to this. I hope you got some value from it, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.